It is the year 2009. IDW's Transformers series is now in the hands of editor Andy Schmidt. In a bold new move, the books bring in fandom darling Don Figueroa and give him the opportunity to permanently undermine his standing with the readership by reinterpreting the classic Generation 1 character designs as bizarre movie hybrids with faces like Lovecraftian horrors. And then Andy Schmidt stole his design, so he left. Working alongside Don was new hire Mike Costa, fresh off his successful run on G.I. Joe, full of new ideas and an inability to see the Transformers as aliens over robots, getting more and more uncomfortable with both the books and the fandom, until finally he was just tired of being told how great James Roberts and Nick Roche were. So he left. But during all this, we got a real vision of Andy Schmidt's vision of what Transformers was in Continuum, a book intended to clean up the continuity, which instead made it more confusing, added in a bunch of weird stuff, and erased stuff that seemed to matter beforehand, forever imbuing him with an aura of distaste for the idea of return readership, and demonstrating his all-too-Marvel tendency of creating for the new customer only. So he left.
Okay, is anyone seeing a pattern here, seriously? Listen, we got Wreckers. Wreckers came out at this time. We got Wreckers. This era was a win. Best era ever. Wreckers. Oi.
Welcome to Moonbase 2.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest IDW Retrospective, otherwise known as the one I didn't want to do. The only one I didn't want to do. I wanted to do All Hell, wanted to do Furman, want to do what's coming next. Don't want to do this one. Why am I doing this one? I don't know. But joining me in this trip down memory lane, we have two fine people. One is a well-known Moonbase, Underbase, Underbase alumni lady. Basically, she was the Underbase for a while with a large British fella. It's Amiee, Lady Rec.
Hello. The reason why you're having to do this is because of lies.
Yes, because you said, oh, I know what I'll get him on for. That was your fault.
No, we gave you the choice.
No, you didn't.
Yes, we did.
There wasn't any other choice. There was that or the ongoing. Nothing was going on.
Well, we were hoping. We had such high hopes.
Yeah, never hope. And joining us, I think this is his first time on the show, we've got Jeremy from Transmissions. Yakko, no one calls you that.
No one does. Although, a certain voice actor that was, the name escapes me, Bulkhead from Transformers Prime, I think he follows me on Twitter because he thinks I'm Rob Paulson. So I'm not gonna tell him I'm not. So
he may figure it out eventually, though.
Maybe after I ask him to come on Transmissions.
Join us on our podcast, Rob. You sound so different.
Yeah. How you doing?
Hi. Yeah, we're all good, I think, and we'll get straight into it because this is probably the most controversial era of IDW's run, the so-called ongoing era, where we got our first seeming ongoing series that had a lifespan of at least 3 years, possibly, which was eventually a 2-year run of a main book written by Mike Costa, who was at the time well known for his work on G.I. Joe, very critically acclaimed. The main artist for the first half of the series was Don Figueroa. Alex Mill came in, Guida Guidi came in. A lot of people sort of cut their teeth in this series. Accompanying it were a series of mini-series. Oh, there's grammar for you. We had books like Drift, Bumblebee, Ironhide were the early ones. The most notable one of the bunch was, of course, The Last Stand of the Wreckers, a book that kind of made Transformers acceptable as a reading material for the non-Transformers fan. And, of course, we had another book, which I'm not talking about, and you can't make me. Ever.
Do you want me to say it?
You say what you like. I'm sitting here looking out the window.
Heart of Darkness.
No. Babies are dying all over. Ears are exploding just from hearing the words.
I recently did a panel at a convention and went through the entire IDW continuity, and someone came up to me after and was like, you left out a couple series. I'm like, yeah, because those sucked. And Heart of Darkness is one of them.
Nice. It all kind of opened though with a very odd book called Continuum, which was written by then editor Andy Schmidt, a man for whom continuity was kind of a dirty word. Slightly infamous little fact file book, which we won't really touch on. I'm just telling you, it's out there, people, and you never need to read it. It is atrocious.
It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. Just say what it is. It's wrong. You don't need to read it.
It's morally and it's insulting. The basic premise of the ongoing was we were about 3 years after All Hail Megatron. The Autobots were still on Earth, so were some Decepticons, but many were off-world. And the humans are now gaining the ability to fight back. So the Autobots are very much in sort of a on-the-run guerrilla mode. Breakdown the Decepticon Breakdown is captured by Spike, Witwicky, and his team, and Prowl breaks cover because he was so heroic, that Prowl. And a series of events follows that gets Ironhide killed. Hot Rod goes into rebellion, teams up with Swindle briefly and calls himself Rodimus Prime. Optimus quits leadership. Bumblebee is instead voted in as his successor. And nominally the book is about the relationship between the Earth group Skywatch and the Autobots, while around them Decepticons and other evil forces are gathering in the background. It would eventually culminate in the two sort of simultaneous stories. Police action?
Police action, yeah.
Police action, which told of the Autobots bringing about a permanent shift, well, I'll say right now, in the structure of their relationship with the humans, and Chaos, which was kind of a culmination from the miniseries that we will not speak of, which also brought an end to the Cybertronian War. The book and Mike Costa's run ended on a single issue, which was set in the far-flung future, which had Ironhide looking back on the past with Generation 2 Autobots and Alpha Trion, and sort of providing an Hulk the End style capper on the IDW universe. So I'm just going to start as I always do. Jeremy, since you're new to all this, how did you get involved in Transformers comics in general and IDW specifically?
I had a handful of G1 issues. I was not a big Marvel G1 reader as a kid, largely because I didn't realize it was there. I was a cartoon first person. And then I was aware of Dreamwave. I got those as I could, but I was a poor college student. And then I really kind of got in during this period, during the ongoing period, and then picked up Last Stand after the fact, and just kind of fell in love with the whole thing, warts and all. And yeah, I mean, this is the dark time before the bright sunny days that come after this period.
Yes, this is very much the meteorite heading down towards Earth and the dinosaurs going, what? Amy, what about yourself?
So for me, I was pretty much, I did not pick up any comics at all as a kid. I lived in a small town. There wasn't really many options. Watched the TV show and loved it, of course. And well, the animated, cartoon. Then about a year, I believe, before ongoing got started, I got back into the fandom. I had little kids, and hey, I want to, get back in touch with some of the kid shows that I saw as a kid and share it with my kids. And I got back into the fandom at that point and realized, oh my gosh, I've lived in a black hole for the last 20 years of my life, and now I get to catch up on everything. And that was fun. I started hanging out on the forums, and mainly Moonbase 2. At the time, the Moonbase 2 forum that they had, and they were looking for some reviewers, and I decided to go start reading some of the comics and put my lot in with the reviewing that they were looking for, and didn't think I would get it. And then they said, yeah, sure, here's a couple issues, write up a review. And I did that, and then they said, okay, now we have to have you on a podcast. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is that? And then the rabbit hole just went from there. I fell down the hole, got on the Underbase, and been doing it. Did that for almost 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And that was the time that I started reviewing, ongoing was Getting Ready to Launch. Picked up Last End of the Wreckers. I really enjoyed the Infestation, or not the Infestation, Simon's run with the Asians. I really loved that. And Last End of the Wreckers blew my mind. And it was all downhill from there. I mean, hey, it's great. And he's right. The sunny days came later than that. Sunny days came after. I was like, yeah, it was a good 2 years of a cold afternoon. But
it was
yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that before we start touching on the stories themselves. I want to look at the creative teams around it, because it was kind of like, not looking at the miniseries yet, but it was kind of both creatively, advertising, everything else, a perfect storm of how not to make a Transformers book. The advertising early on, what was it? Half of issue 1, including Ironhide's death, Optimus surrendering, all the big points, was released by IDW in like the 2 weeks before the issue came out. Like, the only time I've heard of something quite as bad is when DC had someone like do a very spoilery synopsis of Batman 50 recently. And then
they were trying their hardest to not get us excited about it or something.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it was like the opposite of what you should be doing with a brand new book.
Usually, like with movies, the more advertisements you see for a movie, the worse the movie probably is.
There's a lot of truth in that. I think the fact that you can really tell that these days by trailers, like, is one of the ending scenes in the trailer.
Right.
It's not a good sign these days, is it? But one of the first things I want to talk about is Mike Costa. So he came on from a pretty big successful run on G.I. Joe. He's done some Turtle work, he's done some Marvel, Spider-Man, a bunch of other things. And he came on to Transformers, and he said on an old Moonbase interview, actually back in Dave days, that he was really excited to come on, and by the end of the first year, he was burnt out. He found the book really not very fun. He didn't really enjoy interacting with the fandom on the IDW forum. And most importantly, and I've got the quote here, is that he felt that the Transformers lacked the usual motivations of an action-adventure character, and he didn't see how they could realistically have personalities like humans and the need to have them act human-esque. They don't have all the basic things that humans have that motivate them and give the motivation for drama for a story. They don't really get hungry, they don't get tired, they don't have women or relationships, they don't fall in love, they don't have parents, they don't have brothers and sisters, they don't have religion, spirituality. How you have to manufacture these things, and they are inherently incoherent. He also found the toy-centric nature of it very restrictive. Mike Costa went away with a very bad taste in his mouth. It really does seem. How did you think his writing ever really got past that core idea of not being able to see beyond them being alien robots, Jeremy?
Yeah, not really. I mean, thinking back, I can't think of any particular story that just stands out. I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's just very, like, you have the Simon run that really did expand, like, took everything that came before he took the best pieces, came up with this great thing. And then after this, James and John, they expand into all these things that Mike says, these guys can't do. And Mike just never really adds anything to the overall narrative. Like, it's just kind of, these characters do these things, nothing, like, no advancement.
Yeah, very static,
right.
which was a theme of his writing, that Transformers, because they're so old, everything happens very, very, very slowly for them. But that only really worked in that Thundercracker story he did.
Right.
Which was, I think, the only issue of the early run that people got
Prowl,
excited about.
Was he the writer on Prowl?
Spotlight
yeah,
Prowl.
The Spotlight Prowl.
Yeah, I mean, that one actually did have a good scene where Prowl's going through the value of human life versus Cybertronian life, because the human life is so short. I thought that was a good look at Prowl, but other than that, I don't really.
What did you think, Amiee?
Well, it's interesting because I did a little bit of prep work before this. I actually was on the interview where we interviewed him, where he said that, and because I wanted to go back and remember, it's a couple years since I've been on that interview, and when I went back and I reread all of this, Mikey, just for you, to make sure that I was like on my game, because I just read. So I basically in the last 5 days I've read 40 comics, I think about. I binged on it, but I wanted it to be really fresh in my head. So, it's interesting because I went back and listened to that interview again. And it's true that he definitely, I think he overthought things just a tad. And I kind of got the sense of this, that like for the first year, he kind of overthought to the point of almost burning himself out. And luckily, I think Andy Schmidt at the time, because he apparently was talking to him quite a bit because he's the main editor, it makes sense that they would, be talking to one another. I think that Andy kind of tried to energize him again with bringing on different things, which of course came on and evolved into chaos. Yeah. And I think that distracted him from overthinking it too much. And so for me, reading all of the issues all over again, I find that the first 12 issues, 13 issues, I kind of didn't really like all that much. And then I kind of saw how things kind of felt like they shifted. And I started going, okay, this is looking a little bit better. There were still some issues. But when we get into space opera, which is collected in Chaos Theory, I actually really liked it. And my opinion of Spotlight Prowl has completely changed in the couple of years that it's been since I've read it. And I kind of wish that they had put out Spotlight Prowl before the whole ongoing. Because I think I don't know, it's just something about how it feels like it kind of is that go-between issue between what we got in All Hail Megatron 15 and what we actually got in the ongoing with Prowl. And it kind of makes this little shift because the whole point, you're wondering, why are they still on Earth? And they really never give a good explanation of that, except in Spotlight Prowl, they kind of hint and kind of let you try to make your own collection or your own idea of why it is that they're staying from Prime, at least. And so I kind of wish, I know that they weren't quite sure where they were going to put Spotlight Prowl. They were actually, if I remember correctly, they were going to put it at the end of the first year of ongoing, and they pushed it up. And I kind of wish that they had just, nope, you should have come out with that. That would have been the perfect issue to start out on, to be honest. Because I think by the end of that, you kind of realize that they're staying there. And in the time that Prowl has stayed there, toward the end, he kind of shifts his idea of, like Jeremy said, what he thinks about the humans. So, yeah.
It's the interesting thing for me is he gave like I said, he gave a list of the things that he didn't really get. Essentially, that by the nature of what they are, you can't write them as people, but the story is requiring I write them as people. Yeah. And yet, all the things he mentions in his list of they can't exist for these creatures are things that now we almost, you could say, feel rather entitled to expect. Yeah. Everything from being hungry to tired to relationships to religion to everything. Like it's kind of just a fascinating quote considering what the franchise evolved into in the next 6 years. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even the parent thing. You know, we towards the very end we got a clear, a pregnant Transformer.
You live in me.
Well, and the other thing is that, I mean, if you look at everything that came just before ongoing, they had a war that lasted forever. and pretty much destroyed their planet. They got kicked off everything. I mean, like they were dwindling and, trying to survive. And where is there any time in there for anything, if you're just fighting just for survival? I mean, every little bit of their day-to-day lives is put on hold just to survive. So I would think that, the cost of that was that they destroyed their culture, basically. And so I kind of didn't really have much to go on that. So, I mean, I guess I can see why, but at the same time, I think he just overthought it because, I mean, I think about, because he's, we named off science fiction and other things that he's read and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, science fiction has been pretty good about, giving robots emotions and basically, human attributes. So I really think he just totally overthought it. And, as a creative, when you overthink things, you can kill your creativity. So that being said, I think when he wasn't worried about it as much, got energized by other things, it didn't make it a thing that he was going to use as a pitfall, his stories got better.
Yeah, I think definitely at the end. I'd say Chaos is probably the strongest thing he did.
Yeah. I really like space opera, though. I mean, I have to say.
No, I like space opera a lot, actually. But because Hot Rod's Rodimus, then he's really fun. We get Garnak and Bob.
Yeah.
Bob.
A lot of good things originated that other authors did better jobs with.
I still really like the first half of the Ironhide miniseries. When it was still this big mystery thing, but we'll get on to that later. But joining him, of course, was a longtime Transformers fan favorite, man of the war within, Don Figueroa, who came on for another one of his fairly incomplete runs. By the time he came on here, he was fairly, I think it's fair to say, burnt out in Transformers. He'd done the Beast Wars books and didn't finish them. He did part of the source book and didn't finish them. He did part of the movie comics and didn't finish them. And he came on for the first 6 issues of the ongoing and dropped out after that. He did 2 more issues, 14 and 15 afterwards. But his art style very much defined people's memory. And when I was going over it, it was slightly surprising how little of the book he actually wrote or drew for, only 8 issues out of 30. But his approach, now at the time he defended this as saying he wanted to do something different, which was to very movie-esque faces and stylized bodies. But years later he'd suggest that this was an edict from Hasbro to sort of ride the Revenge of the Fallen train at the time. But I was very much in the camp that faces are important. His face work was just terrible. But something I didn't remember was when I was going through the issues is how poor his human art was. Because, like, a simple thing, the fact that everyone looks very tired all the time with the big droopy eyes.
That's true.
And also the famous page, the deconstructed page, where there's only like 4 thought bubbles and 4 panels, and everyone got really annoyed over it for its use of space. And I think it's literally the same images, just with the eyes moved. And you wouldn't get that today. Like I can't think of any major Transformers artist working today who would do that. But Don was brought on for the name recognition, But what was your opinion of the art there, Amiee? I mean, were you on it? And especially like as things became more chaotic, we got in new artists throughout the book who would produce wildly different designs for characters because there was an editorial edict, which was they are not going to tell people to stick to character designs. In fact, I remember there was an IDW forum post where they got really aggressive and say, listen, we can either do it this way or everyone can draw to a house style like they did in Dreamwave, which didn't go down well. But Amiee, what was your thought on the artistic side of this book?
Well, going back, if I remember correctly, during the time when it came out, we were really kind of frustrated because it really wasn't reading very well. and I'm in the same camp as you. You've got to have facial expression, and the faces of Dawn's Transformers are very kibbly. There's a lot of pieces to them, and I think that does not lend well to expressions, especially if you look. I mean, now that we're going back and viewing this, but Unicron has ended, so we've wrapped up, and we've seen facial expressions, over since this time that have been fantastic. They carried stories in such beautiful ways. So to see the faces of the Transformers, they either have dull surprise look, or they do really angry faces very, very well. I love Dawn. I love his work. I've loved his work that he's had before this, and so it wasn't that I didn't dislike it. It was that I just didn't think it read well. If I remember correctly, at the time, I think we went through 5 or 6 issues, moved on to ongoing, and then we came back. And I remember some fans out there, and I don't remember who it was, but they passed us a couple of images of, they had taken Dawn's work and put different faces of the characters on there, and it quite literally just fixed the problem. So if you just take the heads off the characters and put other ones on there that actually have facial expressions, it reads just fine. And I just thought, I mean, it's one of those things where this is a medium that you're giving to human beings. I'm pretty sure that 100% of the audience is human being when they're reading this. They do need to have something that they can see that emotes as a visual medium. And so for me, I mean, it does. I mean, I go back and I reread it, and I had a really hard time connecting with a lot of the characters that Dawn was making. I like these characters. I know I've connected with them with other artists, and it just didn't read well to me. So in that regard, I was just like, yeah, if you just switch the faces out, it really does help a lot.
What about what's your opinion of the really transient art and design as it went on?
With what the Transformers with Dawn's work, yeah, or just
after Dawn and the designs, they're like I'm looking at a picture here, and within the ongoing, Bumblebee had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 completely distinct designs by different artists, in a 2-year period.
That's true. Yeah.
What was it? I remember being very jarred by this back in the day.
Yeah, it was just it was hard sometimes to make out some of the characters, to be honest. I mean, they changed a lot, and so I kind of had to go back and look and say, oh, who's this again? Oh, that's right, that's this person. It's kind of one of those things that people change designs so quickly from one artist to the next. So I do remember, as I was reading, that they did do they had Bumblebee's character a certain way, and then as ongoing went through, he got shot in the head, and they gave him when they finally fixed him, they changed his design. So I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, the characters change. That's from one artist to the next. Sometimes it does do that. They did try to carry that at least with an ongoing, to keep them the same way. I remember the mini, the Bumblebee mini, which
Best name of an author, though.
Yeah, yes. But I remember for the longest time, I had a co-host that said it didn't happen until Heart of Darkness happened, and then it was like, oh no, Bumblebee is actually much better than this. Good times.
Jeremy, what's your thoughts?
For the most part, I like Dawn's art, but it's mainly the mouths that get me. And I was just flipping through from issue 1 to issue 6. He actually did improve, because issue 1, it looks like they all had braces, and
that's true.
Braces. And no one was shown with their mouths open. It was just the teeth were, their lips were open, or whatever constitute lips, but the teeth were still touching each other. And in issue 6, it actually got to a more traditional kind of look of, you could see the Transformers had teeth, which is, it's still confusing, but it looked a lot better in issue 6. But yeah, I could see if he wasn't already just burnt out, the fandom's reaction to those early designs probably helped.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't great.
Yeah,
for how people reacted.
But moving on to people like E.J. Sue, who had done most of Simon's stuff, it was great. But the going between different body styles, like you mentioned with Bumblebee, it is a little bit jarring. And there's an odd thing that as I'm looking through some of these early E.J. Sue things, it looks like all the Transformers have camouflage, and I don't know what effect they were trying to do there, but the coloring was a bit mess.
It's a weird thing. He came in with it was like something he did with it's a stylistic thing he was doing. He wasn't doing it last time he did anything, but that was because he was on Lost Light. But there are several issues he did where it's just they've got this weird patchwork effect.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's supposed to accomplish, but other than that, the actual designs are fine.
Yeah, I agree. I would think on ongoing they tried to keep it at least every 6 issues together. But yeah, from one, they had different artists that came on that were just, their styles were so completely different that sometimes it was a little jarring, because you'd get one style in one book and then one style in another. And not that I don't like or dislike that. It's just that I think at the time, and maybe this was what am I trying to say? Because nowadays, like even through Lost Light and More Than Meets the Eye, we got Windblade, which was a completely different style than others, but it still lent really well to the rest of the styles. So it's just one of those things where different, I don't know, with Andy Schmidt's era of being the senior editor, we got a lot of really drastically different styles in each of the books. Like you go from Nick Roach's designs to like the Bumblebee mini, or from that had Heart of Darkness, which was so completely different than anything else that's ever been on Transformers. And at first, when I saw some of the work from that artist, I thought, oh, this will be interesting. And then I saw actually what he did, and I was like, no, this doesn't work as well as I thought that it would. And it was too much different. That it just pulled it completely apart. And I was like, okay, whoa. This is not working for me at all. But, I'm kind of glad that we at least have an opportunity to see a style that different. Because now I know 100%, hey, that don't work. Yeah. We worked out all of the problems. And the 2 years of the first ongoing, I think, was a lot of, it was basically, it seemed like to me, a whole experiment of what will work and what won't.
Yeah, I would hope coming out of it. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I hope coming out of this, they realize that they need to have some kind of, if not a house style, just character design models, and say, Nick has his take on characters, but you can tell, that Springer is Springer, and then when Alex draws Springer or Andrew draws Springer, they're using the same base model and then putting their own take on it. And I don't think that was happening during this era.
No, no, it wasn't.
No, not really.
I think it was maybe in the ongoing, but not everywhere else.
But we mentioned him there. And I it's rare I'd call someone like this out, but they were such an influence at the time. Andy Schmidt, good old Schmitty. Came over from Marvel. Was the head editor for the entire Annihilation event, which went pretty well back in the day. Started working on G.I. Joe and Star Trek for IDW before going over to Transformers, where he replaced Denton J. Tipton. And to say he is not well loved would be something of an understatement. He made numerous public posts and interviews and everything else where he basically called out the fandom for, quote, their obsession with continuity. He once said on the IDW forums, if I could go back to the 70s and 80s and stop Marvel and DC from ingraining comic fans' brains that continuity is paramount, I would. He also came up with the Transformers Continuum book, which, in an interview for Team Formers, he confirmed that all those changes were made intentionally to simplify things because he was obsessed at the time with getting in younger readers because he thought they were the core audience for a Transformers book. So he said he wanted slavery introduced because it was an easy concept to understand. He didn't want both the Skywatch and Machination because he thought children couldn't understand two different groups with two different goals. He also stole art, which was a thing. We all know the famous stealth bomber Megatron, yeah? Over on Cybertron, they've got an archive for a DeviantArt post Don Figueroa made, where he confirmed that he originally designed stealth bomber Megatron for a story pitch. Never went through, but Andy Schmidt liked it and he asked if he could use it. And then Don said, oh, yeah, well, sure, we'll meet up and we'll have a chat about whether or not you can use it. And he said, okay, we're going to meet at, where was it, Long Beach Comic Con. Bring it, revise it, bring it over. We'll have a chat while we're there, whatever. Don Figueroa shows up at the Comic Con. Andy Schmidt does not. And not long after, the Stealth Bomber Megatron design ended up in the books. Yeah, and then it went on to get, toy and everything else, and Don Figueroa was not very happy about the entire experience.
Ouch.
Yeah. But he was he just had a very bad manner about him in dealing with people, I found. I remember him being I think he was interviewed by Moonbase and the Underbase at least once. And
Twice. I listened to those ones too, sorry.
Yeah, the guy never really sat well with me. Eventually, he got shifted over to the HasLab division in 2011, replaced by John Barber. And then in 2012, 2013, he was fired from HasLab when the entire thing closed down in a layoff. He's currently, I think he's editing somewhere, but he's teaching at the Comics Experience School in California as well. Also, he wrote a Galvatron story and didn't read the 2 or 3 issues Galvatron was in to make sure that he didn't make any huge major errors, and he made several. So he didn't go down well. I mean, Jeremy, did you have any experience with him when you were reading this, or did you learn anything about him afterwards? I mean, editorial has become a bigger thing these days, and especially under John. So
yeah, during this period, I was just getting into it, and I wasn't really paying attention to editorial, politics or any of that stuff. But after the fact, I heard, everything he did, and, I was familiar with Don Figueroa from, Dreamwave era and then his early stuff here. And then when I found out the whole Bomber Megatron thing, I was like, wow. Because, it's like very clearly that he stole it and, just not even apologetic or anything. I don't think Don's done anything for Transformers since.
No,
he hasn't.
He's gone off to do his own toy line, actually, but which had a comic, I believe. Amy, what about you? Because you, like I said, you did speak to the man.
I did. Andy's kind of one of those guys that I never had any bad experiences with him. I think I remember briefly hearing about the whole Megatron bomber thing, but I don't know if honestly, I don't really know. I don't remember hearing that. So I'm like, oh crap. This is the first time I actually really hear that I recall hearing about it. And I'm going, oh yeah. It doesn't lend to much to the fans, but just kind of like bang, dang, jeez. Now I've got all these thoughts about Andy and going, yeah, after all the things I listened to, I was like, yeah, that sounds like something he'd do. Sorry. It just seems like there were so many missteps, and I think a lot of it had to do with the leadership, which would be, squarely in Andy's court. We got a lot of different things that the fandom didn't really like. The colorists on the first 6 issues of the ongoing are not great. They did not help Don's designs at all. I mean, if they had had somebody on there like some of the colorists that we really, really like in the current run that happens after this, like any of the Joshes, LaFuente, Prips, I mean, any of them, if they
were all around as well.
They were. They just weren't being hired to do the work. And I think that we would have gotten better colors. It would have, I don't know. There's so many. It's like they have this basket of, the IP of Transformers, and they took all of the stuff that was well known out and put all new eggs in, and now they're kind of surprised that we've got quite a few eggs that cracked. It was all based off of editorial decisions that were Andy's job. He was the senior editor. He was the guy that was pushing all of this stuff, and I think he has his opinion of what the comics industry is, and I think that kind of colored what he wanted to do for Transformers, do something completely different, just take everything new out and put in new things that he thought supported his opinion of how the comics industry is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think that it lended well for Transformers. Just because I don't know if it's maybe that, like the quote that you said where he wished that he'd go back and change this idea of continuity. It's like, some of that is actually to Transformers' benefit. One of the reasons why I think it maybe lasts as long as it has is because there's a bit of continuity, and people like to be able to read a story that I don't know, has that ties in with other things that they've read. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
It adds weight to the later stories.
Exactly. Well, IDW's Transformers has not been around as long as Superman has. Let's just say it. It has not been around as long as some of the older IPs. That doesn't mean that we have to do everything artistic and we're going to make this huge impact on the comic book industry by some sort of philosophy that's going to be put in here. It's like, what? You're making it too complicated than it needs to be. Just tell a damn good story and let people make the connections. I have a hard time believing that the first superhero comic book that ever came out, the style that they did and everything, the artistic feel, that was not on the mind of the person writing the story and the person drawing it. They just wanted to do something that was different. Everybody else's interpretation of that has come after. We've interpreted the crap out of it. That's what art is. It's a medium. But I can guarantee you that was not what was in the heads of the people doing it when they first started. And it's like, we've analyzed the crap out of it years since. And
Siegel and Susha just wanted to tell a story.
Exactly. They just wanted to tell a story and put it on a page. And it was a different medium than had never been done before. And that was history in the making. But they weren't thinking about all of the analysis that was going to come afterwards. All that happens is the interpretation of people that read it afterwards, and it touches them in different ways. It's like, I can guarantee you they weren't thinking about making that happen. Because that's not what an artist is. I mean, I think in the long run, they were like, well, people are going to interpret it this any way that they're going to interpret it, but I'm just going to do it this way because this is what works for me. How everybody else feels about it, it's all subjective because that's what art does. So it's just one of those things where I'm like, don't try to inject that from the get-go. Just tell a damn good story and because it's going to be analyzed from here till forever by other people for other reasons. Let them do their job. You do yours. Just tell a good story. Don't worry about that. And I think, again, coming back to I think it was overthought a bit. That being said, I kind of look at, again, the first 2 years of this ongoing is kind of a time. The best thing that I think came out of it is the fact that we got an ongoing. But everything else seemed to be an experiment of what will work and what won't. And they threw everything up against the wall, and the stuff that we didn't like, they finally replaced and went back to what I think people liked better. And hey, what do you know? Here we are 5 years, 6 years later, and we've gotten some pretty damn good stories. And everything that I think both Andy and Costa were kind of struggling with in their own different, positions that we're in, I think that we've found somebody that fit the position and have really brought something to it that we never had at that time, which is fine. I mean, everybody's going to bring something different, but I think we learned some lessons out of that first 2 years that just didn't get repeated. And that's why it was dark days, but it got better. It got a whole lot better. And everything that I think we were struggling with, there was frustrations on both the fandom side and even the professional side, I think worked itself out by just a change of the guard.
No, I think you got a point there, to be honest. But well, let's go into some of the dark days then, because we've talked about all the build up and everything else and the creative. Let's look at some of the actual stories they produced. So the ongoing is broadly divided into 5 or 6 arcs. Extra ones if you start bringing in Heart of Darkness and Chaos Theory individually and stuff like that. But so the first one, Volume 1, it was For All Mankind, which was sort of our introduction to our new status quo. It was our first real delving into Spike Wicky's character, Optimus's new role, the theoretical role where he wasn't in charge, which was never a functional role, as I remember, because he still basically just gave the orders. It's just he sometimes looked at Bumblebee and said, "That okay? That okay?" And of course, we had a character that's like Ironhide. And in the middle of this, we had a very odd issue, which is, in my opinion, the best issue Mike Costa did, which was issue 4, the Thundercracker One-Shot, where there's a little bit of plot stuff, but it's mostly about his perspective on things. And looking back, my God, did you never guess where he was going to end up? But so, guys, your opinions on sort of the opening ongoing arc there, Jeremy?
Well, but coming out of where, like, All Hail Megatron, all that, the story that kicked it off, I thought was decent. It, kind of the status quo, although with Skywatch being the people that are trying to take out these rogue Decepticons, but it's surprisingly violent, like, right away. They kill multiple, Transformers. And like right off the bat with Spike, we see, I guess it's not in this first arc, but we see that he's kind of a dick. And I think we got that in All Hail Megatron a bit, but Costa really leans into that. Especially, I think it's in the second arc where it's like right after Optimus, here it is, chapter 2, when Optimus surrenders, Skywatch can't get a hold of Spike because he has turned off his phones because he's with a woman. And that's not really something that we need to see in a Transformers comic. I mean, I don't know. You could imply more than show even something like that. I mean, I think they went a bit far with it, but it does reinforce just how much of a jerk Spike actually is.
Spike's an interesting case because the author clearly wants you to hate him, but you end up disliking him in a way I don't think was ever intended, which is you dislike it when he shows up, not you dislike what he does.
Right.
It just to the point where nowadays, like, it's become a gag of how much of a prick he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Spike thing I think early on was just problematic. It really highlighted some of the art problems for me because no one's legs are that long. That lady's legs are too long. Like, she has no torso. I don't even want to look at the logistics of that. Like, he's driving around in breakdown at the time as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had forced breakdown to be stuck in his alternate mode and is just using him as a car.
That was just creepy. That's just weird. But yeah, I remember being relatively open to the story when it was going on, because I was just getting into podcasting at the time, so we had a little small show going with a fella. So I was looking into it a lot, and I liked the base concepts. I liked a lot of the execution. The combiner stuff at the end just felt a little messy, but Swindle was great fun, and like I said, I really enjoyed the Thundercracker issue. But honestly, it's one I get harsher on hindsight, because a lot of its core concepts had relatively little impact on the story. Like Optimus retiring, I thought was a key one, because he never left the story, and he never left an important leadership role. So looking back on that book, it's sometimes very difficult for me to separate what is intended in those 6 issues with what came after, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what John did with the same concept when, after the death of Optimus Prime, you still had Optimus showing up every now and then on his own quest, but he was out of the main story, and you got to see the other characters rise up and take place of that void, and that never happened here.
Yeah. It was just... It was just one of those narrative things you really thought had legs in it and never really went anywhere. But Amy, what was your opinions of the opening story?
I really disliked the fact that most of the time Optimus Prime was sitting in a cell contemplating whatever. At the time, if I remember right, we were like, yeah, he's got a death tat. He's in his corner. And every once in a while, they tell him, hey, we need you. I was like, okay, I'll get up and go do something. And then he goes right back. It's like, what? Nobody wants to read that. I mean, you like what Jeremy said. The same concept pretty much happened in John's run. And what did he do to Optimus Prime? He sent him on a quest. And actually, the stuff that he went and did made sense. When they built up that, they moved on to the next. Like, he would go out and find stuff, which made relevant to the next conflict that they had eventually down the line. And so he was building something with him instead of just like, oh, no, just go sit in your corner with a dunce hat on. It was the most, I thought, wow, this is just, it's not a story I really want to read. I mean, it makes, I guess, somewhat sense, but at the same time, it's like, do we really want to see a hero-like figure like Optimus Prime sitting in a corner doing nothing until he's told what to do? And it also made it hard for any of the characters to be able to do anything else, because it was like, well, who's the leader now? Bumblebee. Oh, what is this, a popularity contest? I mean, it just didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. I know it's, if you look at it, I've had some people come up to me and say, oh, no, it works because of this. Yeah, I get your point. But again, on the other hand, do we really want to be seeing Optimus Prime sit in a corner, twiddling his thumbs, contemplating his decisions? It's not a story. It's not a plot point. He can still be doing that on another planet. Doesn't have to do it right there. And that was it just seemed like, I don't know, the concept of shoving them in a box until we need them so somebody else can be leader. It was painful. It felt painful. And, I can go on and on about it. It's a different point of view. Other people will still have their opinions about it, but I just didn't want to read that. Yeah,
I will say the
issues.
Yeah, the constant, like once Bumblebee is voted in charge, the constant not recognizing that by the characters that voted him in charge was very frustrating.
Yeah. It just
we vote for you, Bumblebee, now stand in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, just be our leader, but then, they complain about him when he
and they still go to Optimus.
Yeah, they go, exactly. And that's a comment, it's the theme that continues all the way through Costa's run on ongoing. Even when Hot Rod shows up and gives the Matrix back to Optimus Prime, and he says, we're leaving. What happens? Everybody goes with him. And again, it's like, let's poop on Bumblebee. He confronts him about it and everything, but he still rolls over and takes it. It's just like, it's the same concept happened for John and James when they popped on too. I mean, it's the same problem that had not been really addressed. And the first thing they do in the first issue, they make the decisions that needed to be made to make sure that these characters go forth and do something. It just felt like there was a lot of inactivity. there's lots of conflict, but it just felt like the conflict was placed in specific places, and it's well, my opinion of the first 6 issues is like there's a lot of conflict going on. Although I know there is, but it's like they found a way to make it not conflicty. I mean, that's what I came out of, rereading it this last week. Is like I know there's conflict. It's happening, but it just doesn't feel like anything's happening, and it kind of goes for the first 12, 13 issues. Reliving that frustration, I can just relive it and think, oh yeah, I can see why it was frustrating to read at the time, because nothing goes anywhere. I mean, there's conflicts, but they're all the impact of those, like the consequences of those, there's no consequences. Like the consequence of, oh, well, they have to go track down. I mean, if anything, the consequence in the Bumblebee mini was pretty high. But I mean, when they finally figured out, oh yeah, we're being used, and if we don't do what we're told, we're going to get locked down into our car modes and zapped. I was like, that's a consequence. That's hey, they were motivated, but then that ended and it was never mentioned again. And I thought that would have been interesting if it continued to run down that conflict, because now they've got a consequence to having gotten in, to making a deal with Skywatch, some offshoot of Skywatch. I mean, that wouldn't have, the ongoing would have been completely different had they run with that. But that had huge consequence. Who wants to get locked in car mode? And so for that one, I mean, I looked at it, there were other issues with that one. But the whole point is, they found a way to make the conflict not as conflicted as it should have been. And it was hard to love that.
Yeah. It's kind of like that one child you've got who was just like, listen, I'm glad you're in my house, but don't touch my stuff. And Amy's a parent, so she knows.
Yeah.
I love you all equally. Just, some more equal than others.
The House of Optimus Prime says, don't touch my stuff.
Welcome,
like,
Matt says, get out.
This is the house. This is my house. Do not touch my stuff.
We mentioned him there briefly.
Hard time with that.
Oh, God. We mentioned him there briefly, but this is where Rodimus comes from in the books. Does anyone have an opinion about his introduction? Which was basically just, I am literally taking my toys and going home.
I liked it, to be honest. I was pretty happy with that, because he goes and does something proactive. I'm going to go find the Matrix. And we didn't see anything of him for, quite a few. I mean, well, at the time, it happened that it was the first, second, third issue. I don't remember what issue specifically where he takes off. We don't see him again for like another 6 months, because how issues came out. I remember he popped back in. This happened in the spring, and then we didn't see him again until close to December, winter-ish. And he actually went out somewhere and did something proactive. It was completely insane.
But that fits with his character.
But one, it fits with his character, and two, it actually brought something. The story actually starts moving when he actually does something, and that was kind of it. In a way, I really, really liked that. And of course, the way that he was named. Thank you, Swindle. Thank you, Swindle, with his, hey, the Fonz kind of. It's like that's one of the things that came out that I think Mike wrote of Swindle that has changed his character forever, and he's now loved by everybody, I think, because of that. That was a good decision right there. But
Swindle's a character you have to struggle to get wrong.
Yeah. So he definitely got him right in this one. So,
Jeremy, did you have any opinions on Rodimus?
I enjoyed him. Like we said, it was a crazy plan, but that's his character. Particularly as we see later on. And like Amy said, he did something, and rather than being stagnant on Earth, you're seeing him go out into space, going to get the Matrix, and he actually succeeds. And it was such a change from just all the politics and the stagnation on Earth, where you do have the conflict, but there's no real consequence. I mean, nothing happens.
Well, speaking of nothing happening, what followed on was what I call the time where everyone checked out, which was issue 7 to 12, otherwise known as the one where the Decepticons are eating each other. One where
that
everyone
was
hated,
interesting. That was kind of interesting.
the one where everyone hated Spike, and the one where Transformers fought North Korea. So this, I don't hate International Incident. I mean, I don't like any of the issues, but I don't hate it. But I very rarely meet anyone with anything nice to say about it, apart from the fact that Guido's art stands up fairly well. Because there were some interesting ideas in here, like Thundercracker being brought back into the story, the idea that Transformers were being active in the rest of the world. But it's just, like, Spike, again, just really, like, not unlikable, disliked by the readership. The Decepticon issue, it was just basically there to remind you that they existed and that they weren't happy. And then just International Incident was a narrative mess. And then, like, the Predacons come in, and everyone's like, what? And they're with China, and suddenly it's like, it's an international incident. Woo! But Jeremy, what were your thoughts on this part of the ongoing?
Guido sure can draw good.
That boy done draw well.
Yeah, I mean, just flipping through it looks amazing. Guido, is one of my favorite artists, and this is just, showing how good he can do. But yeah, the story is just a mess. We do get some interesting things with some characters, like why does Cosmos have to have a bubble over his head? It's not like he breathes. But we get the Predacons, we get the Combaticons at a time, and it's really great to look at. It's just not great when you actually look at the words.
Did anyone pause and go why am I even in a Team America movie when it was revealed it was Kim Jong whatever it was? Because it wasn't Kim Jong Il, it was Kim Jong Un or something, or it was some other name that was just it's just close enough where just why did you even bother changing it?
Yeah.
I just cringed through that entire story. Which was a shame because it was the first time the Combaticons had done anything since, I think, Spotlight RC.
Yeah, I did like.
I think you're right.
I did like towards the beginning when Spike is trying to get the Autobots to help him with the situation, and they see the news report of the president giving a speech, and Spike saying, don't say it, and then the president says basically any nation that uses Cybertronians is equivalent to using weapons of mass destruction. I thought that was a funny, set of panels where you're seeing, simultaneously he's like, don't do it. Oh, he did it.
And then he goes, oh yeah, we didn't hear that. Nobody heard this. Nobody heard this.
TV was off. Everything's fine.
And then it led to one of the cheesiest lines, I swear. We're going to do it in disguise. And they just went, oh, that is so painful.
Mm-hmm.
Such a prick. Amiee, International Incident. I seem to remember you weren't a fan.
It was an incident.
Oh,
it was an incident. No, I remember the Underbase when we finally got to the end of this arc. We had probably one of the most negative podcasts ever, and we actually afterwards, a week later, actually apologized to our listeners for being so incredibly down on it. I mean, because it even after we reviewed it, it was the aftertaste that it left in our mouth was just that bad. For the one and only time I think we ever apologized for any review we ever did, and that was the one. It was an incident. I really going through it again, I just read through it really quick and just went, okay. I don't really have a comment
story
on it.
in it. That's the thing.
I mean, that's the thing is that, I literally once the 2 years of Costa stuff was done, I literally did not go back and reread it again until this week. So it's been at least 5 years since I've read it. And to be honest, I had to go back and read it because I couldn't remember what actually happened, because nothing long lasting really made that much of an impact on me, except remembering how frustrated I was with it. I mean, my take on it has shifted a little bit, but most of that has come from the fact that the story after is just so good, I can let a whole lot of it go.
Well, and James did such a good job of making the various bits and pieces work with the good story that he and James were saying. Or telling.
Yeah, exactly. I liked, to be honest, I was quite intrigued with the cannibalism that was going on with the Decepticons. I was like, damn, that's dark. But then I thought, it's actually kind of fun, to be honest.
No one checked Amy's search engine? What have you seen?
No, it's just the idea of them, cannibalizing each other. That things are, Starscream finally has his way, and then what happens? They all start trying to eat each other. That was just a laugh at the end. I was like, oh my gosh, in a way, I kind of feel now going back, that was a little bit of a brilliant idea, a little darker than I expected to remember, but yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, there's in this. I really don't have much more of an opinion. I really like Vito's work. It's fantastic. I like E.J. Sue's as well, even though sometimes the little camouflagey kind of patchy effect, it just didn't make sense. But it was designy, and I was like, okay, it's all right. I guess I can, it read the way that I needed to. It told the story the way that it needed to. So, but yeah, my opinion is it's an incident. And I was glad to move forward after this.
Yeah, well, I have nothing really to add to this one. So we're going to go on to the Revenge of Decepticon arc, which was when Alex came in as the main artist for this one, I believe. And Amy and I think, are going to have a bit of a disagreement here, because I hate this book. I hate this story so much. But Amy, I want to hear your opinion first before I use my host powers to trample it into the ground.
Revenge of the Decepticons. I remember being really frustrated at the end of it because so in this arc is where we get Optimus Prime and Megatron finally coming toe to toe. After reading at the time, we had gone a whole year of reading Transformers ongoing, and they built things up like Megatron, of course, wasn't there, but we got little threads of him. The fact that, and a couple of images just come right out at me right at the get-go. The end of the cannibalism Decepticon issue, we get his hand, Megatron's hand, flexing. We thought he was pretty much dead. He comes back to Earth. You get this build-up, and whether or not they intended it or not, there was a build-up to Megatron returning back, and we get the opportunity where Optimus Prime and Megatron go toe to toe. He tries to shoot him with some human. What was it? The
light, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was some satellite that comes out of and hits him, and then Megatron and Optimus Prime grabs him and says, "Why won't you die?" And then we break, and we don't get that battle. And I still, to this day, after a year of reading this, there was no payoff with that. And so this arc is the most frustrating for me because we never got that payoff. And I know I know Mike was trying to do something different. I'm like going, stop! Don't do something different. We wanted to see a battle. We wanted to see that battle. And you stole it from us. And it's still like, it should have been. I really wanted that. I mean, everything was building up. It was probably one of the biggest builds, whether or not he intended or not. It's building in the background over reading all these issues. Where's Megatron? He's coming back. He got a new alt mode. He shoots Rodimus and the Matrix out into space, shows up with a whole bunch of, weapons, says, I'm not going to hit you because I might kill you, Optimus Prime. Optimus Prime tries to kill him. He says, why won't you just die? I mean, he never says that. When has Optimus Prime ever punched somebody in the face so hard after something and says, why won't you just die?
There is precedent these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Bay probably saw that and was like, hey, yeah.
I can do that.
Give me your face. In the IDW universe, he never says that to anybody. And yet he said it to Megatron. And then we don't get that fight. And I'm going, I really wanted to see that. That's what I have to say about this arc right here. It's like,
Jeremy, what's your thoughts on this one?
I have a lot of the same frustrations, I believe, that Amiee has. The art was better. We get, a few more issues of Don Figueroa, and I thought the art was a lot better. He's like slowly fixed his faces a little bit. I mean, they're still not perfect, but then towards the end of this, we actually get Alex Milne, and that's when things start getting a lot better, I think.
Yeah.
But the plot was frustrating at times. This is where they introduced the Megatron guns, right?
Yeah.
Which ultimately leads to the assassination of Jazz's character.
Yeah.
It basically any use of Jazz on Earth after this was having to deal with what happened when he killed a human. And out of all the characters, you take the one that, likes the humans the most, and I don't know, it hampers future writers, in my opinion. But I don't know. This was more of the same to me, where it was just frustrating.
For me, I think this is narratively the worst story that Costa did, at least in the main book. The art is better, although the coloring is a mess.
It's it's the guy that was running it. That Dollhouse and Jay Brown were not my favorite colorists. It's like they weren't even trying.
No,
they just put some color in there and got the job done ASAP, and then moved on with their lives. And I'm like, going, yeah, pretty much. I'm glad they didn't come back after this. After this ongoing was done, we got all the colorists that were so much better.
Yeah, but when you compare, because it's Alex in this, and then if you've seen it here, it really makes you realize the importance of a good colorist. If you compare it to the Chaos Theory artwork, it's just night and day in terms of the colors and the balance and everything else.
There's one there's the area in there where they pretty much block colored all of the Decepticons walking behind Megatron, and it's like they're in this really dirty kind of bluish orange kind of look, and I looked at it like, that's the dirtiest color I think I've ever seen on a page. Man, if they just fixed that. It's it looks almost like a coloring error, like they didn't print it correctly or something.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, I reread all of this in the collection. I just went, that's probably one of my least it's just one panel that I just had facepalm here because it just looks so terrible.
Yeah, but apart from that, just the story's nonsense. The story's terrible in my opinion. It's just the Jazz thing. It's a superhero story inserted into a military fiction or a science fiction action adventure fiction. It's not a superhero story, because soldiers shooting people like that. Even when you work in he was under control and the civilian and everything else. Especially even when John spent a lot of time on this. He'd still include Jazz didn't necessarily feel guilty about having pulled the trigger. It was more the after effect it had in the public image, which is the best you can do with that story. I think John spent too much time on it, to be honest, but he at least did something with it. Here, it's like, oh no, I killed a tiny human. I'm a monster. Oh no, he was going to shoot your friend, but that's fine. And it not only is Jazz the one that was like, oh, he's the most affectionate to humans, and at this stage in IDW, he was, the Black Op guy as well. He's the guy who's done some stuff, and it just felt such an artificial story. And then you get to the Megatron stuff, and it's complete nonsense. It's still complete nonsense, even after John's tried to explain it a couple of times. What was Megatron's plan? Forget about the fight. Never bothered me. Like that they didn't have a fight. It bothered me when they dropped the satellite on him. It did nothing, and he's so stupidly powerful that he feels like an anime super robot that wandered into a Furman story. And then his grand plan is to make the Autobots look bad, surrender, profit.
Exactly.
There's a big gap in the middle there.
But he talked it up so much that you're just like, okay, you're talking up just like, oh, I don't want to hit you too hard because I might actually kill you. It's
Why?
Just,
Why doesn't he want to kill him?
Exactly.
Why now?
And that's the whole, But the whole point was just because it seems like he just wants to watch Optimus Prime squirm. That's all he wants to do. I know, exactly.
Why didn't he shoot him?
Just because he's...
A satellite hit him, it did nothing.
I know.
Just pull the fucking trigger. War's over. Because the entire... even with John's fix, like, oh, he wanted to get a space bridge to take all the Decepticons to Cybertron, so he needed to be there. Why didn't he go to Cybertron instead of coming to Earth? Why did he want to be on Cybertron in the first place? Why does it matter? Why?
Because Galvatron had to be there first.
Why?
I know.
No. He could have beaten Galvatron without any help. With
True,
that kind of power.
exactly.
I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with bad editing too.
Oh, yeah.
Because really, it's the editor that is supposed to help kind of direct the entire story, you know, and then the writer actually puts the details in. And you know, we talked about Andy Schmidt, and I just think he had no plan.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or the plan was just so loose that they just didn't think, what's the motivations of these characters? And ask those questions. Why are they there? What's the payoff?
Why doesn't he just shoot him?
What's the conflict and what's the resolution and what are we trying to build to the next? And a lot of those just kind of aren't really, you can just tell that there's not a lot of motivation other than the fact that, well, we need that to get them from point A to point B to point C all the way to Z. And this is what they need to do. And we didn't really think too far into what their motivations are. And again, now come back to that interview we had with Mike Costa, where he said he struggled. And now everything makes sense. And why was there fan rage over that? Well, let me tell you, because of these exact reasons, because we want to know why this is the way that it is. And there really is no reason. There's no plan. It was, they were moving chess pieces around, and that was frustrating.
Well, let's move on ourselves because I'm getting angry thinking about it. After this, we had kind of a weird thing, which was the Space Opera Chaos Theory minis, one of which introduced James's solo work rather. I think at this stage he knew he was coming on for More Than Meets the Eye as well. And the other was filling in Rodimus's thing. Probably the strongest volume out of the entire run. Art by Alex and I think it was Guido. Touched on stuff like Wheelie, Garnak, Sunstreaker, Ironhide, Galvatron, but then we also got the backstory stuff for Optimus and Megatron. I will always say it's a stronger Optimus story than it is a Megatron story.
Yeah.
Megatron is, throughout which he's more of a foil than anything else, and I always thought that was a bit of a shame. But Amiee, what's your thoughts on this one?
So originally it came out as space opera, but it's collected now in basically Chaos Theory. It is one of the most strongest, like you said, arcs in all of Costa's era of ongoing. And I think I couldn't find the information of where I remember hearing it. I want to say that this was the pitch. This was the original pitch that started everything ball rolling with Costa that he wanted to do. So it definitely shows the passion is there. Rodimus landing on some planet somewhere, running into Wheelie, and having that whole arc go just seemed, it just had a passion behind it that was not there in the previous work that Costa had been doing. I mean, Ironhide was good too. I really liked Ironhide. But this one I liked probably just about as much as I liked the Ironhide mini as well. It just had a passion there that I don't think we had seen until now. And then I think running out of this and into Chaos was just the motivate. It was already set in stone, so we were just doing that next thing. And so the passion that was in Space Opera, I don't think was as inherent in Chaos, but it worked for me. But then you get these 2 issues from James that coming back to this whole Optimus Prime punching Megatron saying, "Why won't you die?" Holy cow, those 2 issues unpacked a whole lot of drama. And it was just so beautifully executed that it was like the 2 shining issues that, having 2 years of seeing the ongoing and then just having these 2 issues dropped in our laps. We had mediocre, and then we had filet mignon in these 2 issues. It was just amazing. And you suddenly got this idea of what they could be, and that made just quite an impact. But the good thing is, one of the observations that I had going back and reading it, because I hadn't, is that you get a pretty good idea that James knows exactly where these characters are, and he gave us a pretty good illustration of where they are. And then we go to read the next 5 years, and wow, the shift from going from this Megatron to the Megatron we get at the end of Unicron, or at the end of Lost Light, is fantastic. He's so dark and so much hate like oozing out of him on the page. Like he was, colored dark. It's like they couldn't make him any darker just because he's so angry. And the talk that they have back and forth, it's just like he's oozing this darkness. And you go from that to what we got at the end of Lost Light is just amazing to see that change. So I actually kind of choked up a bit seeing that, because everybody's wondered a little bit, just, what's the outcome of Megatron? Go back and read those 2 issues. Those 2 issues will tell you exactly what happens to Megatron in the end of Lost Light.
Jeremy,
I'm not going to say it.
Oh,
just go enjoy. Yeah, I'm not going to say what it is. Just go back and enjoy that. And reading that, I started crying reading that. It was just like, just to know what we were getting and to see that. Those 2 issues are so relevant still.
Jeremy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Chaos Theory is definitely the pinnacle of this this whole run, I think. And I believe you're right that James did know he was doing more than meets the eye at this point. So this is like a lot of setup. But it's just it's also clear that James had read what came before, and he knew who these characters were. And it comes out so clearly that, we're getting these characters written like they haven't been written probably since Simon started the whole continuity. And to top it off with the art from Alex, just fantastic, and just it's a tease for what we were about to get, where you're seeing a page with more characters on panel than we've seen in a long time, and they're all clear, they're all colored distinctly. It was just fantastic. And a lot of people don't like issues that are just heavy on the talking, like Daryl. But in my mind, when you have Megatron in a cell and you have Optimus and, you're just having them talk, we never really have that opportunity before. So it's just, I think it's fascinating on that level. And you see that Optimus at some point does go through and kind of, he, when he shocks Megatron, that's just, he's like, I crossed the line and I realize it, and that's what Megatron was wanting me to do. So it just, those two issues I have gone back and reread probably 7 or 8 times, and it is pretty much the only thing from the ongoing that I've gone back to reread.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's one of the reasons I always said it's a massive shame we never had like a follow-up issue set in the modern day between Optimus and Megatron. It was a conversation I think really needed to happen. And one of those things I think we might have gotten if the books had gone on longer. If we'd gotten that season 3 that we were supposed to be getting, I think
we never got pacifist Megatron meeting back up with Optimus.
Not just Optimus, the Optimus that had gone down a different road, shall we say. And it would have just been very interesting to see that like reverse perspective. But it was incredibly strong. And Space Opera is a really fun read. It's one of those story beats that would be picked up later on. That sort of Transformers in space, for once, which is a weird thing to say, like it's a revelation, but it's so rare, really, narratively. But overall, it was just a really strong set of books, I have to admit. But moving on from there, we had kind of the wind-up of the main books. We had sort of parallel stories, Police Action and Chaos. Chaos was really not... It was like the wind-up of the whole kit and caboodle. But the most notable thing about it really was that it introduced Livio Ramondelli to the franchise. Police Action was wrapping up the Earth story, removing the Transformers technology, dealing with Spike, etc. Costa has said he was more energized during this, and he was co-writing with James at the time. But looking back, I have to admit, it's probably the least engaging of the finales, of the run finales, rather. Because it's the Chaos story is largely just go to space, fight a giant monster that is from a much worse book, who's got a really weird combining gimmick that even when they tried to make sense with it later on, still had flaws in it. It's got good bits with Cyclonus and Galvatron, but it just never did it for me. And Police Action, again, it was basically just saying like you hate Spike at this stage. You really hate him. Well, now you were right to hate him, and that was my plan all along. But you played your cards too well. And it's never really had major impact either, beyond some Prowl stuff. It's an interesting one in that it was our first sort of parallel story experiment, and it at least showed you could do that. And I'm wondering if part of the way it was released was to test the public with, will you buy 2 series, once every 2 weeks instead of the once a month thing. But what were your thoughts on sort of this wrap up, Jeremy?
I enjoyed Police Action, I think, more than Chaos, because the whole Devoid gimmick was... It just made no sense to me. It was just kind of like, let's throw all of our toys in, out here and just smash them all together. And to me, it was kind of like he knew he was getting off the book. He was just kind of blowing everything up just, to kind of give James and John a clean slate. And it's like, you do whatever. I don't care. Police Action, I thought it was a good wrap-up of the Earth storyline. And I really liked, particularly like Spotlight Prowl, which the trade kind of includes in Police Action. I think that was my favorite out of the bunch. Just kind of the inner workings of Prowl, and then we we get the beginnings of the always calculating, always got something going on in the background prowl. And I really like that prowl. So I think that's changed the character. Going forward, I don't think you're gonna see, at least in comics, you're gonna see a prowl that isn't that always calculating the odds type. Very logical.
Amiee, what about you?
I liked police action. It was, it kind of had a little bit for me. I kind of felt like Jazz finally gets a little bit of closure in it, just because at the very, and I know it was very prowl centric, but then Jazz comes in at the very end, and they wrap up basically their whole reason for being on Earth, and it was kind of like done, dusted. Okay, I'm glad to be free of you, Earth. Let's not come back again. And that was kind of my attitude toward it as well. I was very happy to be off Earth. Even when we went back with John, I was like, are we going back to Earth again? Do we have to? But yeah, I really liked the wrap up of police action. And then Chaos was kind of like the reset button. And I was okay with that, knowing that it was a reset button. But it's just crazy. It's just, why would you want all of the Decepticons to suddenly combine into one thing? But if you actually think about it, we got the same thing. We got the same ending of that as we did with Revenge of the Decepticons. We get a build up to a final, basically a final battle, and then we never get that final battle payoff. Like Optimus Prime in Chaos jumps into Vector Sigma that's been taken over by the Devoid and comes out with a broken Matrix. We don't really see a battle. We just see a bright light of, we get a page of white, and then all of a sudden he's back and the Matrix is in two pieces. And it's like, well, we really didn't see a battle, but we know that the Matrix, it's implied that the Matrix, basically expended whatever it was going to expend, and then we get a reset button, boom. And then we get issue 31, and then that's it. I mean, that's the end of Chaos. And so I was just like, well, it was crazy, and it was kind of in some ways kind of pushes the boundaries of what makes sense for Transformers. And Devoid was kind of a mess because, again, it's basically Unicron light, and that's kind of the attitude that we had at the time. And it kind of suffers a little bit from the fact that it's what Heart of Darkness brought us.
Yeah.
So the bad guy that was built up in Heart of Darkness is really the guy that shows up. It is 31. What it is. Yeah.
31 is a problem child for me. It's not badly written.
No, it's not.
But I have always had, there's always a wee bit of, after the run you've had, you do not get to put the hat on this. You do not get to put the capper on where this book is going.
Well, at the time, he was the third writer to have written Transformers as long as...
And he wrote a bad run. He wrote a bad run.
To me, it was a mediocre run, to be honest.
It was a bad run. And it was just to me like, I don't want anyone deciding where this story should be going, and the only way to get past it is just ignore everything, or pull an Andy Schmidt and just play tight and loose with continuity. I think the way John handled it was masterful, to be honest. But I also think it was one of those story elements I just wished had never been introduced. I don't like the idea. I am a continuity nut, and having this issue was like, okay, now they have to work towards this issue. So John doing it the way he did, I think was a very clever thing,
Yeah, I mean, when he finally, when we realized that John was just like, that issue was just a vision. It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, great. Yeah, you can just do whatever you want now.
Yeah.
And it didn't take much to explain it away, too. That was the other thing. I was like, oh, yeah, this is just a dream.
Space magic.
I'd like to think that it was just some version of the multiverse continuity, blah, blah, blah. There you go.
Ironhide banged his head a lot.
Maybe this is the universe that the alternate Lost Light went to.
Or better yet, Alpha Trion planted this in his head to see if he could actually make it happen, because he punched all of those Insecticons to death, and it just ended up being, something that just never happened. It's just this little vision that Alpha Trion put in there of what could be, and then never happened.
And now he's dead.
Yeah.
And he's been dead for months.
Dead.
He's been dead for like almost a year now.
Spoilers!
But yeah, so that was the ongoing, really. It was not a time of joy.
Lots of frustration and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, and
I've got the dental work to prove it.
And then just the feeling of a creator who didn't really want to be in the room he's in. But yeah, like you said, Andy had such a hand in it. But of course, alongside it, there were several mini-series. Now, I do not want to go into every single one of these, because there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's basically an entire another podcast. But one, of course, we're going to have to touch on. That's Last Stand of the Wreckers. Written by Nick and James. Art by James and Guida Guidi. Like I said, it's the one that made the non-Transformers fan look at the series. Very human, this story of this black op groups that are going in to this very bad place, taking a bunch of no-name characters and making them instant cult classics, giving us my favorite IDW villain, which is Overlord. Yeah, and it's aged very well. It's not one of those books you go back to and think, oh well, at the time. This is it's aged very, very well. So, Amiee, I might as well just turn you loose. This is this led to years of stalking a poor Irishman, showing up outside his window, sending threatening letters to his wife. Sending him that one piece of hair that just said "for you." It was all rather weird, to be honest.
All jokes aside, when you've read, so much mediocre, and then you open up something that's absolute gold, it makes it shine even brighter. That was Last Stand of the Wreckers in an ocean of mediocre. It was amazing. Blew my mind. Like I said, I'm not called Lady Wreck for no reason. So, I Last Stand of the Wreckers is just a gem. It really kind of is. And I remember that at the time, I remember watching went online and found a YouTube video of another person saying something about literature and comics, and basically that Last Stand of the Wreckers, from her point of view, her perspective at the time, was that it was good literature. And I agreed with that. And I still agree with that after going back and reading it again for this podcast. And just absolutely, it's as relevant today as it was relevant then. And I submit that it'll continue to be relevant every single time anybody goes back and reads it. It's really, really good Transformers fiction. It's a good standard. I think that's the reason why it's been so successful, is just because it hit all of the marks and then some. And thankfully we get to enjoy it for years to come. So definitely go out and read it if you haven't read it. I mean, there are plenty of podcasts that I've been on that have said the same thing over and over again. Last Stand of the Wreckers is the cream of the crop. You have to go read it. So.
Jeremy.
Yeah. When I was doing that panel where I was going through the entire IDW continuity, I was like, if there's 3 points where, as a new reader, you can come in. You can come at the very beginning with Simon. You can come in at, Death of Optimus Prime, or just read Last Stand of the Wreckers. If you don't care, if you don't know any of the continuity, and you just want to read a good story with Transformers and just get a taste of what, a good Transformer story can be, read Last Stand of the Wreckers. You don't need to know anything about anything. It's all set up. It's all self-contained. And I think that's what's great about it. And I think that's why it kind of stands strong even today. It's just a good story, and it just happens to feature Transformers. And I mean, it's one of those stories where you're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan of the classic war stories where, it's an impossible mission, and characters that you learn about and you start liking and stuff, and then they die, so you have impact to those deaths, and this does that. And see, I mean, who knew who Guzzle was really before this? Just a minute number of Transformers fans. But this book made you care about Guzzle, and then with what he goes through, you really feel that. And I think that's just a testament to how good this book is.
Or Iron Fist, jeez.
And Iron Fist. I mean, like, all of these characters existed. These weren't inventions by Nick or James. These were just complete, like, G-listers. They just, they had toys, but no fiction. And this book, gave them backstory, built them up, and made you care about them. And I think that's just fantastic.
I think Pyro was kind of my big takeaway from that, because it was creepy.
Yeah,
it wasn't right. What was being portrayed of this guy who was just like, I want to die like him, but I don't actually care about any of the things he cares about, but I want to die like him.
But the thing is his condition actually is very approachable. I mean, how many of us are obsessed with our characters? It just took it to a little bit of a darker place. But the thing is that he was so approachable and easily lovable because of that, even though it was kind of creepy. Because it's safe. It's just a story. It's just a character that's in a story, but we can relate to him. I mean, even Iron Fist had the fangasm kind of reactions to certain things and stuff like that. So it's like there's so much that's approachable in this that for somebody who understands Transformers, everything that, like I said, like we've already quoted a couple times, that everything that Mike Costa doesn't get about Transformers, this issue or this mini pretty much debunks it all. There is a culture, there is a belief system, there is all of that stuff is there. They just don't throw it in your face and say, hey, we know all this stuff. It's like, no, it just tells it smartly, and you can tell because of the way that they wrote it that that's how it is. It doesn't have to be acknowledged or even defended. It's just, it is. This is the way they are. This is what they feel. This is what they do. This is what they care about. These are their problems. These are their damage. This is their damage. People die and things are accomplished. It's like I said, it shines because of where it was placed at the time. And it's still continued. I mean, every single time Wreckers has come out now with another issue of something else, it's just, it fits perfectly. It's a promise of what could be when it first came out. And we continue to get that after this ongoing wrapped up and we moved into another era of a different group of people running it.
It's a unique book, really, in many ways. I'm not really sure where we'd be without it. Like, it is such a keystone book. I don't know if because that show, pushed James to the forefront when Abnett and Lanning pulled out of doing the follow up to the ongoing. James and John were put into that position. And then Andy left, and John was moved into also an editorial role. And without Wreckers, I don't think Transformers, as we understand it, would have a chance of existing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, especially I'm sure the influx of sales didn't hurt it as well.
No. Selling books helps.
Yeah.
As recent years will tell you.
And since Abnett and Lanning are the ones that did Heart of Darkness, I am very glad that they didn't do anything else.
Yeah. Award-winning. Like
they've done great things for
authors.
Yeah, they've done great things for other publishers, but they don't get Transformers.
You'll go away now. You'll go away. But right, so we'll move on into the other minis, and like I said, I don't want to spend time in every single one, so we'll do one each. How about that? We'll mention one each, and then we can spend as much time those individually as we want. So Jeremy, pick a mini to talk about.
I guess can we go back to Ironhide?
We can.
And
sure.
I mean, this is set firmly within the ongoing timeline, but I always enjoyed this miniseries. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly why it gets such a bad rap. It's kind of a nice self-contained story. The art is really good. I mean, it's our first kind of real in-depth experience with Casey Collar. And I don't know, I have reread this miniseries a handful of times, and I still enjoy it.
Amy, what do you think of Ironhide?
I remember when Ironhide came out, we really liked it until we saw Alpha Trion, and for some reason he read really strangely.
Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow, exactly. But now going back and reading it again for this, I was like, you know what? I love him. In fact, I wish he stayed the weird guy that he was in that.
Yeah.
Because they kind of pulled it back a little bit when when we see him after this. And then I also want to know, how was it that he brought Ironhide back? How did he do that?
Space magic.
I know. And it's like, well, we never did get to explore how he did that and then recreate it again. So
I always liked Evangelis's theory that he was Ironhide from the future.
I think we actually asked Mike Costa about that. He says, I didn't really intend that, but I like this idea. Keep going with that. Because it just does so many weird, interesting things that you're like, yeah, that's just out of the box thinking right there. But yeah, I do like this book. I kind of wish that they kept him crazy and weird. They did pull it back a little bit after this, but it's a fun mini. It's some of the stuff that Casa did kind of just never really got explained. They just moved forward, and I was all right with that. But going back and reading this is a nice little nugget of fun. So, and you're right. It was the first time that we got to see Casey Collar do a complete mini series, and it's fantastic, and it made me fall in love with his art.
Sure would have been nice if we had that a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and other books.
Stupid things like health insurance are more important to him, so he'd rather have a day job.
Should have drawn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the consistency throughout is just so nice.
Well, he uses rulers or something, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I think it's just built into his brain. He's just consistently, able to do that. I mean, watching him draw, it's exactly like that too. So he just has the perfect, most straightest line ever built into his hands.
Should have been drawing other books. But yeah, I like the first half of Ironhide a lot. I thought the second half was kind of standard. But I really like the mystery element, because I was thinking at the time that Transformers need to be moving into other genres. Like, I would have killed for a full-on horror book at the time. Seriously, like I had an idea for like Lockdown, sort of spinning off of some of the Drift stuff that I think would have made that, like, just I wanted to see some genre experimentation. But overall, it's one of his definitely most competent stories. It's just, for me, like, in the tail end, just like, and then there's fight and 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 dead. But Bob wasn't introduced in that one, was he? He was introduced in Space Hour. But and Sunstreaker coming back annoyed me, but that was more because I was really pissed off at how the short story beforehand had handled him dying, and just like, oh, he'll be back. Fuck off. Yeah. In that case, Amiee, pick a mini.
I'm gonna go with Drift because
Mm.
we haven't mentioned it yet, but yeah, Drift. What I liked about Drift, we got Alex Milne and Josh Perez, the Dream Team, Dream Up or Team Up, and it got a backstory of Drift. And the downside of Drift is, I think when it first came out, I think Hasbro had some edict that here's Drift and he's awesome and you're gonna love him. And I thought, what a way to shoot yourself in the foot. You say that, and then all of a sudden everybody has to not like him. And I think a lot of people didn't. I remember there being a lot of grumbling that they didn't like Drift, and who cares about his mini, and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, it's such a good story that, why would you do that? Just let it stand on its own. He's like, here's Drift. Here's a mini series for Drift. Just, it is what it is. Go read it. See if you like it. That's all you had to do. Drift miniseries. I mean, you did do the same thing about Ironhide. It's Ironhide. He's back from the dead. It's like, whatever. But yeah, I really liked the Drift miniseries. If I remember correctly, how it's collected in the IDW collections, it's actually in volume 4. But it actually did come out exactly right, I want to say, right after Last Stand of the Wreckers and Ironhide hit. Then it was this one. And I believe it was in the fall, just before we got, was it during Chaos or the year before that? I don't remember. But, it came out in Costa's era. And so even though it's collected outside of that, it was actually written during that time. And it was just one of the other series that got us by while we were reading ongoing. It was like, okay, there's ongoing, and then, hey, let's go read all the minis because they seem to be doing pretty good. But yeah, I really liked Drift is a really good story. I've given it away as gifts to my cousins, not my cousins, my nephews, because I loved it so much. I got them the toy and the comic, and I handed it off to another generation of kids, and hopefully they liked it so much that they'll continue to give it to their family. But who knows? But as it is, it was a really good run too.
No, Jeremy.
Yeah, I enjoyed this as well. I'm not familiar with a lot of the Japanese characters that were used here. Which, like, later on, I was like, oh yeah, I should have watched, all of the Japanese G1 series just to know who these people were. But
I didn't either, and I never have, even after reviewing it. So
I haven't either.
You don't need it. You can get a sense of who these characters are right here reading the book. Yeah.
Diatlus's incredibly shiny finger.
Yeah, but it was a good story. I liked it. I liked the background that Drift was a Decepticon at first, and they, Drift as a character, he got a bad rap because of the way he was kind of forced onto people, but later on, I mean, he ended up being a very good character, and this was an enjoyable short mini series that, if you take all of that kind of angst and emotions out of how he was kind of pushed onto people and just read this for what it was, this was perfectly fine. I mean, if you want to compare it to how, like, Windblade was introduced, I feel like Windblade was accepted more, even though, I mean, both new characters, both kind of forced onto people, but I think she was handled a little bit better after they see
handled much better.
Yeah. So that they learned from this, and both of them are great characters in the end.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a decent enough book, but it's just so tropey. Because it is just Shane's an anime fan, and it reads kind of like a mid-90s anime short. To the point where I did a little check sheet when I was reading it of, okay, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. I had no boxes left by the end. So it's fun, and I thing, like, I would say it's not Alex's best work, but it's still fun to look at. But it was just, for me, I found it very hard to get past all this. It's like, I had the same thing with a TV show once, where it's just like, okay, this is literally everything I'd expect you to do if you were doing a live action version of this, and it's really difficult for me to see past. So it's never been a book I've been in love with, but it's one where I think it just gets hard run because of bad marketing. That's really it. And also, like, there was an entrenched Generation Oneness. Like, Drift nowadays is at least widely accepted. Windblade never got this as much, I think, of a backlash into comics, but people who hated her when she arrived still hate her.
That's true. That's true. If they hated her before, they still hate her now.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for reasons that they don't want to admit to. But I'm not going to say what they are, because she's a girl.
Well, the other thing that you say about this isn't Alex Milne's best work is like, because at the time it was.
That is true.
At the time it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because we hadn't seen him and Josh paired up on a book like this in a while, and he blew us away with what he did. It just goes to tell how good Alex is that he has continued to up his game. That what was really great before, he's blown out of the water with what he ends up doing from here on in. It's like he's constantly outdoing himself. So back then it was great. It was fantastic. It was the best we had seen of him. It just got better from here on in.
And in terms of my miniseries pick, no more miniseries left to talk about. None left to talk about. I don't have anything I need to bring up.
Nothing infests your mind?
No, my mind is clean. My soul is pure.
We have mentioned the other two.
There was no other books. There's nothing left to talk about. Infestation was fun. I like Infestation well enough. Nick drew it. Nice art. Galvatron had a very pointy chin.
And then Bayonetta.
Is a terrible book.
Yeah. Infestation served a purpose in helping to redeem Cup.
Yes, and it also involved a time-traveling, giant-breasted robot vampire. So there is that. I've never read the book she's from.
I have.
Like, what's it called? CVO or something like that?
I don't remember because it had such a short run. I think they discontinued it already. But that's the thing is that reading it, that was the only thing that didn't make sense in there was her. Because if you didn't read the stuff that came before, it made absolutely no sense. There was an actual whole thing where she was an actual vampire that was working with a supernatural team.
A giant-breasted vampire.
Yes.
So and let's. I'm looking at the wiki page right now. Let's call a spade here. It was.
That was one of her many features.
Those were a couple of her only features. Like, Jesus
Two
Christ,
features
yeah.
right there.
Like,
a boob and a boob.
It's not even like it is such like early 2000s art as well, because she's got this like zip up top that she's got unzipped almost down to her belly button on in this picture, and it's just like, why? That doesn't make sense. You're a vampire. Yes, her name was Brit. But then she was a helicopter called Bayonetta.
Yeah.
But yeah, Heart of Darkness is one of the worst books I've ever read in any comic. It's hideous. It's terrible. The character development is atrocious. The plotting is rubbish. A lot of those covers are really creepy in retrospect. Like that one of RC grabbing onto his leg. That's uncomfortable now. Very uncomfortable.
To me, the only covers that matter are the Casey's.
The lies! The filthy lies!
The promise of what was to be.
Never was. Does anyone want to say something nice about Heart of Darkness?
No.
The covers are Casey's covers are great. Casey's covers are great. They're fantastic. Just look at the covers and then move on.
I mean, you feel sorry for the people that are completionists and have to have every single comic. Because they have to have multiple copies of this to get the covers.
Oh, yeah.
I think this cured me of being cover. I need every issue of every cover. I think this cured me of that very quickly.
So bad.
Lessons learned.
You're being broke on the internet if you find the old Underbase episode. Please don't. One's missing. Thank God.
I'm sure I have it on my computer somewhere. So if anybody wants to if there's one missing, I'm sure I have it somewhere.
Amy's internet went out suddenly, so sad times. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there, guys, because we've covered as much of the book we really need to. So I'm going to ask ye. I don't think there's any point asking your overall impressions of this era because we've given it. But what's your overall impressions of how IDW has wrapped up and what it's become? And most importantly, what is it that you're hoping to see going forward? So, Jeremy.
I think it wrapped up probably as good as it could have. I found the Unicron event largely fun. We talk about Alex trying to outdo himself. He just completely, raised the bar to a whole nother level when he was doing that. Lost Light, it was kind of a have your cake and eat it too ending. I've been critical about Lost Light throughout the entire run, but I thought he ended it well, and Jack's art improved steadily throughout the series, and I thought, he got a bad rap having to follow Alex and how that all went down, but then as he kind of developed his own style, I thought he ended it on a strong note. And what I want to see going forward is I would like to see them try to do the Hasbroverse again, but with it planned from the start, because shoving everything into the Transformers continuity clearly didn't work. I want it to just, even if they don't start with all the books, I want them to have the overall plan. And I think with Barber as editor-in-chief, I have confidence in editorial that I haven't had in a long time. But I want to see them go back to the war to start off with. But I want to see, like you were saying, you want some different genre books. I would like to see that too. I mean, show us horror stories like you were saying, or mysteries. I mean, you can do so much with these, and I think they've learned that. Don't just give us the same tropes, the same, black and white Autobots, Decepticons. Give us more gray stories. And I would like to just basically like what they did when Simon rebooted it, take the best parts of everything that came before and go forward. Give us Earth-based stories, but give us space-based stories at the same time. Just a mix of everything, because it's a big universe, and you've seen that you can have all of that and have it work.
Amy.
I don't know how to preface from that, because that's all of my hopes right there as well. I mean, when we started the ongoing of Costa and Schmidt's era, it was a very, what is it? I mean, because quite literally, we're basically right in the boat where we were at that point. And so we don't know what's coming after this. The only thing that we have at this point is an editor, and that's it. And we have nothing to go on, and anything and everything is up in the air, and there's both the feeling of trepidation and excitement at the same time. And I very much have that right now. And because there's so much in Transformers to love that's in where we've come from, and at least the least of it is that we at least know that John's going to be directing. And I think if we didn't even have an editor announced at this point, I'd be even worse, in a worse emotional mental state right now, worried about where we're going to go. And that has at least alleviated half of my fears right there, knowing that, John's going to be directing, and like going, whew, okay, well, at least I know that the guy directing the ship is not going to be going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, he's been promoted to Admiral Continuity.
Yeah.
Yes, Admiral Continuity, yes. Yes, you have an entire fleet of good ships.
So he has cleared off his corkboard of all the little pins and strings and everything, and now he has an even bigger board to manage.
Yeah. That's it. It's just like, so, John, how did we notice your transition? He just removes over. I got a bigger board.
And not only is it a bigger board, but it's been cleaned off. So now I have this whole room of cork board.
Yeah, he's
And
like,
he just
my
sort of
box.
looks at you and flips it over and just like, it's got two sides.
yeah, he's just like, I've had to deal with, other people's mistakes. Now I can just start from scratch.
Now they're my mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to make all new ones, but at least they'll be John-centric mistakes, which, to be honest, those aren't too bad, actually.
Why is John morphing into Zap Brannigan in my head? The writers are just going to be various different kifs.
Oh my gosh. I hope I answered your question, but yeah, right now it's we're in a very, I just comparing it to where it was when we heard when Schmidt started the boat running, and the joke was, don't pull a Schmidt.
Except it wasn't a joke.
I have to say, don't pull a Schmidt. Just don't pull a Schmidt. We need a good editor. We need Captain, my captain. And if you compare the two eras side by side, I mean, they illustrate exactly why it is that we need somebody that needs to be running the ship in a direction that really works. And don't tell me that, well, each person brings their own to it. It's like, come on. It's like a good story has a good framework.
Right.
And you build off the framework that comes before, and you also build to something even better. And at times you can even go back and make the framework that came before even better. And that's exactly what we've gotten in the era that Barber has run the ship, is that he has said, okay, everything came before, it happened, we're moving forward. And, oh, by the way, while I'm here, he didn't have to do any of this, but he also made the back stuff look even better than it was when we received it. It's like, that's just good storytelling. And that's the expectation that you have of the fandom at this point. We have high expectations because that's what we got for the last 5 years. The whole run that Barber and Roberts have been on has been that. And that's why I have a little bit of trepidation, because it's a really good framework they left us with. And if they're going to build off of that, great. But they're not. They're starting fresh. So I'm like, here's the time where Barber is going to have the opportunity to shine, because he can fix all the things that bothered him before. But he's also just the editor. It's we've got writers and we've got people that come on. And so I hope that they do a little bit of new, they do a little bit of old, and they do a little bit unexpected. And that's all my prerequisite that I have for the next run, is that they do a little bit of new, they do a little bit of what we're familiar with, and they do a little unexpected, so that we get kind of a nice spread of, let's call back to a little bit of what we've had before, let's do something that we haven't seen before, and let's do something that you don't expect. And I think that's a pretty loose interpretation of what we could get. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, let's hope for the best. Expect the worst. But guys, thank you so much for doing this. Really enjoyed this one. Great to have the different perspectives. But as always, I will ask you to shill yourself out. So Jeremy, do you have anything you wish to shill? He said, knowing full well you did.
Sure. Yeah, and thanks again for having me on. We have Transmissions podcast, 2 shows a week. On Wednesdays we have Transmissions, the toy show. And then on Fridays we have Alt Mode, which is the comics and media. And I'm not sure when this is coming out, but we will have Bumblebee reviews throughout December. A couple of us, as we've recorded this, got to see it last night. And then
cool.
Like Charles and I saw it last night, and then Daryl and Yoshi are going to see it later. So we have that coming up, and then we have Declassified, which is our Patreon show that comes out once a month, and that's always it's an in-depth thing into a single topic, and that's always fun. So yeah, that's pretty much all we got right now.
Amiee, anything you want to advertise or contacts or anything like that?
No, you can just follow me on Twitter at Lady of Rec.
But guys, if you enjoy stuff like this, please consider checking us out on Patreon, where you can get shows like this a week early and extended editions of various things and interviews a week early. And you can get our Moonbase show where we talk about non-Transformery things, which is out once a month. You can also contact us on Twitter, where you can leave us feedback. The address is the Moonbase2. You can also send us an email, themoonbase2@gmail.com, and you can contact me and Irish Paleo, or you can contact Andy and CCTFW. Guys, thank you so much for this one.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Amiee, since I'm in charge of this show, you're wrong.
I'm always wrong. It's all good.
Oh, now I
Don't
feel
fail,
bad.
harass you.
Now I feel bad. Not bad enough that I'll take it back, but yeah. Keep an eye out, guys, for the next show. It's going to be on the first half of phase. I don't know. It'll be season 1 and 2 of phase 2. So Mord meets the RID and Windblade, and with a few extras in there. So yeah, we'll talk to you all soon, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
That's a wrap. I'm gonna have to rush away because I've got Andy
me
in
too.
2 minutes.
Yeah, because he's a whip master. He's like, get your butt over here.
Just send it on to me, guys. Okay.
All right, awesome. How do you want it, like Dropbox or something?
And whatever suits you.
Okay, cool.
Go.
All right, thanks again.
No, really enjoyed having you on, dude.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I will talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.